A very good afternoon to all and a warm welcome for joining us today. I am Vera from UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute and unit within the Singapore Management University. Together with our partner, the Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center from Sasin School of Management, thank you for taking time off today to join us in this second of a four-part series of webinar, where our speakers are going to share with you much insights relating to how we do measurement in the sustainability business practices context. Here is a quick view of today's program lineup. Kickstarting today's session will be Dr. Richard Welford, a visiting professor at Sasin School of Management. And when Dr. Welford is not teaching, he can be seen at advising the senior management of companies which have engaged the Elevate group of companies to work with them to achieve improved organizational performance through sustainability and supply chain assessment, program management, as well as analysis. For the second part of the webinar, we have invited Mr. Benjamin Chua, founder and CEO at Speckle Singapore and Speckle International, to join Dr. Welford in a robust sharing, which will be moderated by our Institute Director, UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute Director, Dr. Ang Se King. Okay, so before we invite all speakers in, we will now put our hands together to bring in Dr. Richard Welford to start his sharing for today. So, Dr. Welford, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome from Hong Kong, which is where I am today. And I'm really happy to be able to talk to you about sustainability, a topic that I've been working on for really more than 30 years now. And what I'm really going to be talking about today is sustainability as a source of competitive advantage, how we can plan that competitive advantage and how we can measure that competitive advantage as well. So I'm going to share some slides with you so I can take you through those slides and you can follow what I'm talking about. Okay, so as I said, for me, the business case for sustainability is actually overwhelming now, and sustainability is rapidly becoming a source of competitive advantage. I would suggest that that was the case for some time, actually, for large businesses who I think in many cases have recognized that sustainability is part of their brand and their reputation. But increasingly now, I think this is also the case for small businesses and for medium-sized enterprises as well. And so what I want to talk about today is how there are huge opportunities for businesses of all sizes in terms of sustainability, in terms of developing market niches, in terms of things like cost savings, and developing the much needed brand that we increasingly talk about, which is linked to sustainability. So let me start with the general case. You know, I'm an academic by background, and I'm still a part-time academic. I publish, I've written books, and I edit a number of journals. And if you look at the research on sustainability, what it tells you is that there's a very strong business case linked to profitability and competitive advantage. So if you look at the research, basically it tells you 7 things about sustainability and the business case. 1, sustainability can save you money. Sustainability is often associated with reduced costs, associated with efficiencies, particularly when it comes to environmental issues. You know, it doesn't take a clever person to realize that if I cut my usage of energy, that is going to save me money, and at the same time it's going to reduce carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions, causing climate change, of course. We've also got overwhelming research that shows us that if we want to recruit and retain the best talent, then they will be looking at the whole profile of our business, including our commitments and our activities around sustainability. There was an interesting piece of research done a few years ago interviewing Harvard Business School graduates. And those Harvard Business School graduates overwhelmingly said that they wanted to work for companies that they trusted and companies that they respected, and that included companies with commitments to sustainability. But the more interesting aspect of that research, and that's probably true for all of our students in most universities, but the interesting thing about their research was that on average, those students were willing to take 17% lower salaries in order to work for the companies that they trusted and respected. So the lesson here is very simple, that if we want to recruit the best talent, particularly in a market where there is a shortage of talent, and that I think is certainly the case at the moment, then we need to be thinking about our commitment to sustainability. The third area that we know is that you can differentiate your products, you can differentiate your services, you can differentiate your whole company by thinking about sustainability issues. So you can get a differential competitive advantage over and above your competitors if you are talking about sustainability issues and they are not. Some of that differentiation also includes price premiums. So we know that in some areas, in some segments of the market, consumers are willing to pay higher prices for products and services that are somehow more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, more socially responsible. The biggest premium that we can observe at the moment is in organic food, where premiums for organic food range between 40% and 80%. The fourth area is the area that investors really worry about, and that is risk. By having a proactive sustainability strategy, you will reduce risks. Risks, for example, associated with maybe community conflict, or risks associated with getting fines for environmental degradation and pollution, or risks of being embroiled in accusations of abuses of human rights, forced labor, modern slavery down your supply chain. The world is a very risky place at the moment, and I would argue that because of COVID in particular, many of those risks have actually increased. So if you take seriously all the different aspects of sustainability in terms of business integrity and the environment and social responsibility, that will reduce your risks substantially. And that will actually do good things to your share price, because I can tell you that investors really don't like risks, and investors particularly don't like large listed companies not being bothered to identify and deal with those risks. As I said before, I think sustainability is intertwined with trust, reputation, brand, and increasingly now we also talk about purpose. They all mean very, very similar things. The benefits here are perhaps a little bit more indirect. Building a brand will have a medium to long-term benefit on profitability. Cutting your costs will impact your profitability tomorrow. So these are benefits that are a little bit more indirect, but they're still significant. And if you think about the brands and the companies that you like, that you trust, that you respect, then I suspect that sustainability is one element of that. Not the only element, I'm sure. I'm sure there are other elements around quality and feel-good factors as well. Sixth area we know is that businesses benefit when they have good stakeholder relationships, when they have positive stakeholder relationships, when they're open and transparent and accountable to those particular stakeholders, particularly stakeholders like local communities that can actually cause enormous amounts of problems for your business if you fall out with them, for example. Some of you may be aware of the gold mine called Freeport in Indonesia. That gold mine a few years ago was blockaded by local communities because they were protesting about the environmental degradation of rivers around that mine. They blockaded that mine for 3 months, and the cost to the mine was $1 million every single day. So that's the sort of damage that can happen if you fall out with your communities. And last but not least, we know that increasingly there is an interest in green finance, sustainable finance, green bonds, social impact bonds, and by being sustainable, you can get access to good money, good loans, good capital, and sometimes at a discount price. So some lenders, some investors will discount according to sustainability trends. So that's the big picture, and this, I would argue, applies to all companies. Most of the research, I have to admit, has been done on large companies because it's easier to get data and do cases. But I believe that most of this research is applicable not only to big businesses and to small and medium-sized enterprises. And when I talk about the research, what sort of magnitude of research am I talking about? Well, the answer to that is straightforward. There are something like 400 academic articles in refereed journals that now shows that there is some sort of link between one or more aspects of sustainability and profitability and financial performance in the medium term. So this is not something that's going to benefit you necessarily next quarter, but it's certainly going to put you in a good position in the next 3 to 5 years and beyond, of course. So if companies are not taking sustainability seriously, well, actually, they're leaving value on the table. And as I say to chief executives, if you're not thinking about sustainability, and if you're not talking about sustainability, and you're not putting a sustainability strategy in place, then you are either completely stupid or you're completely complacent. Either way, you shouldn't be in your job, because any CEO that does not take sustainability seriously is actually not thinking about the medium-term financial performance of their company. It's that simple, to be absolutely honest with you. Now, how does this apply to smaller companies, SMEs, and other types of companies that are not the big companies that are listed on stock exchanges? The first thing I really want to say is that SMEs are not little big companies, okay? To my mind, there is a fundamental difference between the organization that we call a big business and the organization that we call an SME. And I don't think, therefore, we should expect SMEs to just do exactly the same as large businesses who have the resources to do a lot more, have the people to do a lot more, and have much bigger markets and customer bases to serve. So my first piece of advice when I talk to smaller companies is to be focused. Don't try and do absolutely everything because you don't have the financial or other resources. And I think it's much better to be focused on 1 or 2 particular areas than try and do too much and then end up doing it too badly. But some of the areas that I've talked about before are areas where I think SMEs have succeeded. Everyone wants to cut costs, and cutting costs is still potentially possible, I believe, particularly in the environmental arena. I see many SMEs being really wasteful, associated with even using inefficient light bulbs, sourcing their energy from expensive suppliers rather than cheaper ones. So I think cost savings is one obvious area. Differentiation is key for SMEs, I think. You know, SMEs are often playing into niche markets, they're playing into smaller markets, they're providing niche products and services, and that part of that niche, if we can make part of that niche sustainability as well, then I think you've got a double advantage. Taking our staff with us, I think, is really important. within every business, but particularly within small businesses where staff often have a much closer relationship, a much deeper relationship. I think there are significant benefits to getting all of our staff involved in various sustainability initiatives. Along with the niche market, I think there's great opportunities for SMEs to go after niche customers as well, and to identify that customer base that thinks about sustainability, that has sustainability in mind, and which ultimately can pay a premium price in some circumstances. And again, there is evidence that there are premium prices to be had for some products, but not all. The other thing I want to talk about today is the fact that most SMEs that I know are actually very innovative. They're small, they're nimble, they're thoughtful. Many of them are startups, and by very definition, they are capable of generating new ideas and developing new products and new markets, and you'll hear from someone later who's done exactly that with his business as well. So again, there's a huge potential, I think, to combine the niche niche focus with customer focus and developing new products and markets. And there are huge opportunities to push that along supply chains as well, sourcing raw materials that are more environmentally responsible, sourcing new types of products that are of interest to consumers as well. I'll give you one example of that. The fastest growing sector for growth in the wine market at the moment is biodynamic wine. And this is biodynamic wine is basically wine coming from both sustainable and organic sources, but on top of that has all sorts of other initiatives linked to phases of the moon and astrology and things like that. Now, whether or not you think that's a bit of a craze or a bit of a fad, it's actually all linked to sustainability, and this is the market that is actually growing the fastest. Now, all of this is really linked to innovation and creating shared value. So, as I said before, SMEs are good at innovation. That's often where we find the innovation in actual fact. And then big businesses then buy up that innovation or copy that innovation actually. And there's a lot of research on that as well. But the other thing I really want to stress this afternoon is that successful sustainability strategies will be strategies that create value for society, for people, for the environment, but also fundamentally create value for businesses as well. And so for me, sustainability is not a nice thing to do. Sustainability is not about doing good. Sustainability is not about doing the right thing. Sustainability is not a nice feel-good factor. Sustainability is part of your business strategy, which will generate profits in the medium term. And if you can do that in a way that simultaneously creates value for the societies and communities where you live, for people in those societies, and for the environment in general, then we've got a fantastic business model. Now, who wouldn't love to invest in a business that is profitable and creates positive benefits for people and the environment? Now, I've talked very conceptually so far, so let's actually try and get down to some real basics by looking at what I'm talking about in terms of a few case studies of companies that have done this really successfully. And so I'm going to choose a number of case studies from around Asia. But my first case study is about a company called Sea Products. Sea Products, as its name suggests, makes products from the sea. So they're making a whole range of products from fish, from seaweed, from the sea, as I said before. So Sea Products is a Vietnamese company, and its customer base is largely Vietnamese as well. And one of the things it produces is a range of fish oil products. And if you know anything about the Vietnamese diet, fish oil is used pretty much every day. So it's like salt and pepper to those of us who come from the West. And so, you know, parents, when they're cooking products and when they're cooking food for their children, like noodles and things like that, out comes the fish oil and sprinkled into the food. And what Sea Products did is that it added vitamins and minerals to those to that fish oil. Now, it didn't do this alone because it needed to think carefully about which vitamins and minerals do children in Vietnam need, particularly poor children who might not always be getting good diets. So they partnered with a NGO called GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. And what GAIN does is it researches every country in the world and can give you information about the traditional nutritional deficits that poor children may have in country to country, including Vietnam. So you can work out the story. Sea Products then adds the right level of vitamins and minerals to meet the average deficiency of a poor Vietnamese child. Since they started doing this and marketing and telling people they were doing this and talking about the health benefits of their products, sales have soared, they have increased significantly, profits have gone up, revenues have gone up, and they have generated significant benefits, of course, for poorer children. Now, it's very easy to measure how much the revenues went up, how much the profits went up, simply by counting how many products were actually sold. And that's the easy bit, and they can do that, and they do do that. But the real benefit, of course, of all this is that there are impacts for poorer children. Now, those impacts are a lot more difficult to measure, of course, because actually the health benefits of healthy children don't only last during the life of the children, they actually last during your whole life, even as an adult as well. So, you know, measuring business success is quite easy. Measuring broader success is actually a little bit more difficult. Another example I want to talk about is a medium-sized insurance company called Discovery. So Discovery Insurance, based in South Africa, started out an insurance product called Vitality. Now, some of you may have heard of Vitality because actually now AIA uses that term Vitality because AIA bought Discovery Insurance. But what Discovery Insurance did in the early days was actually basically provide healthy people with cheaper insurance. In fact, they even paid for people's gym membership and they even rewarded people's healthy eating habits. So if you could demonstrate that you had a more healthy lifestyle, Discovery Insurance would sell you health insurance at a much cheaper rate. Now, this is a win-win situation. You encourage people to be more healthy, and actually the premiums that go down are more than covered by the cost savings that Discovery Insurance had. So for example, you know, if you are hospitalized, which is the really, really costly part of health insurance, what Discovery Insurance found is that people who were hospitalized stayed in hospital for shorter periods and actually were less likely to go to hospital in the first place. Now, this is a great idea, started by a medium-sized company, and this illustrates what I'm talking about, innovation, because this was then bought by AIA, one of the world's biggest insurance companies, of course. Another thing that I talked about earlier was supply chains and the advantage of supply chains. So this company here, Crystal Group, is actually based in Hong Kong. But they have factories all over Asia, particularly in Sri Lanka, China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Cambodia. And this is a company that supplies the big brands. It's not a huge company itself. It's a sort of middleman in many ways, or a middlewoman, because it sort of it works for the big brands. It actually makes 300 million garments a year. Now, again, it's done a number of environmental initiatives. It's cut its water usage by 30% per garment. In China, its denim production uses no water, no chemicals, all of which have saved it money and actually improved the environment as well. It runs garment factories. Garment factories are typically made up of 80% of women. And what they've also done is work with those women on not just sewing skills and manufacturing skills, but other leadership skills, computer literacy skills, mathematics skills, and also rolled out appropriate health programs for these women. These women are often quite young, between 18 and 28, very typically. And so they've rolled out a whole series of sexual health education programs, reproductive health education programs, which is exactly what some of these young women from rural areas who may not have had much traditional education, exactly what they need. Their sales have gone up, their savings have gone down, they've got higher than average retention rates. Here's an interesting pub question quiz. What is the average turnover rate in a Chinese garment factory? You can just think of the answer. I'll tell you what it is. The average turnover rate in a Chinese garment factory is 10%. 10% per month. So that's about more than 100% a year. So if I can retain my workers by offering them interesting additional programs as well as good wages and benefits, then I'm going to reduce my costs as well, because worker turnover is a very costly business, because I need to find new workers, train new workers, and I lose productivity going forward. Here's another great example of a small company. It's a company called Vision Spring. This is a company that makes eyeglasses, but that don't need opticians. Okay, this is a very interesting pair of glasses. They're plastic frames, plastic lenses, and you'll see on the side of these glasses there's 3 little orange wheels. And what these wheels do is they sort of move 2 plastic lenses across each other. And so by doing that, you can actually adjust the magnification of the glasses. Now, they're never going to be as good as going to an optician and getting your eyes tested with machinery and other things like that. And they're never going to give you that level of accuracy. But these glasses can be used by poor children so that they can go to school and see the blackboard. These can be used by people working at home so they can do their work more efficiently, more accurately. So they're both for adults and for children. Now, this is an interesting product. You might ask yourself how much these glasses actually sell for. Well, they sell for $6 US only. Now, that makes them very affordable, even for people who are very poor and perhaps living only on $3 US a day. So after 2 days of income, you can buy these glasses. Adults can use them, children can benefit using them and benefit from going to school and using them if their eyesight isn't great. So they're very affordable. So they cost, their sales price is $6 US. Their production price is only $2 US. Now, do the maths yourself. They sell for $6 US. You can make them for $2 US. We estimate that there are 700 million people in the world who could use these adjustable eyeglasses because they cannot afford traditional eyeglasses that you or I might be wearing, for example. So again, a small business making a profitable company, selling at scale, and creating tangible benefits for poor people. Here's a bit bigger company, but also illustrates what I'm talking about when I talk about market niches and when I talk about innovation. Ajinomoto, you probably will have heard of, I suspect. It's a Japanese company. Their most famous product, of course, is MSG. But they produce a whole range of food products. And one of the things they talked about a few years ago is the fact that by 2050, 40% of Japan's population will be over 65. Japan currently has the highest percentage of people over 80 years old in the world. It's 10.5 million, probably a bit more by now. That number came from 2019. But in 2019, they had 10.5 million people over the age of 80, which is 8% of the Japanese population. So what did Ajinomoto do? They said, hey, there's a market here. Let's produce food for people who are over 80. Now, what they knew is that when you get to over 80, sometimes your food needs are different. You need different nutrition. You often need additional iron, for example. You often need additional calcium, but you also eat less. But what also happens when you are over 80 is the taste buds in your mouth begin to disintegrate. And so food actually doesn't taste of very much. And therefore, if food doesn't taste very nice or doesn't taste of anything much at all, you tend to sort of, get put off eating it. So what they also did then is add taste enhancers so that actually older people can appreciate the food. I tried some of this food actually when I was working with them, and to me it did taste very salty. But they did their market research, and for people who are 80, at least they could taste flavors in the food that perhaps they couldn't do before. So here's some great examples of companies who've got profitable businesses, profitable product lines, which are also creating significant value for communities. So my suggestion is that when we start talking about sustainability, we put a focus on this idea of shared value, creating value for society, but at the same time creating value for business. And the way we do that, I think, is quite straightforward. Firstly, we identify what social needs I can meet. For example, Ajinomoto identified the fact that people who are over 80 in an aging society like Japan, and ours are not far behind in places like Hong Kong and Singapore in particular. So, 80-year-olds in an aging society had particular needs, and they used their corporate assets and expertise. They knew about food, they knew about nutrition, they knew about flavor enhancers and taste enhancers. They had dietitians, they had experts in place. They used the assets and expertise they had as a company to create these new business opportunities. And that's something that applies to all the case studies that I've shown you already. They're all creating value by having policies and practices that enhance the competitiveness of a company, while simultaneously advancing economic, environmental, and social conditions in the communities where they operate. So whether that's eyeglasses without opticians, whether that's in Ajinomoto food, or whether that's sea products, fish oil, this is the approach that they have all adopted. So what I really want to stress, though, is that shared value is not about sharing the value that I've already created. That's just philanthropy, all right? And I'll come back to my thoughts on philanthropy in a little while. But this is about creating new value, okay? Also, don't confuse shared value with shared values or personal values. The word value in this case very much talks about tangible, measurable value for business and society. It's not about belief systems. It's not about our morals, our ethics. Hopefully, these approaches are ethical, but that's not fundamentally what we're talking about. And this is not about giving back. This is not about doing good. In fact, I don't even like that term, giving back. And the chairman of Nestle was famously once quoted as saying, Nestle has nothing to give back because we never stole anything in the first place. So this idea of giving back is a bit passive. It's very old-fashioned now, I think, because what we're really talking about in the sustainability world these days is creating measurable value for the business in terms of profitability, and for society and the environment in terms of creating new value that is beneficial to society and the environment. So this is not about compliance, this is not accidental, this is very, very much about innovation. And I briefly want to say that this is also not about philanthropy. And I've got a diagram here that I like to use a lot, which looks on one axis at business impact along the bottom here. And for business impact, let's just use the proxy profitability. And social impact on the vertical axis, which is the benefit that we're having on society, on communities, on people, and I include the environment when I talk about social impact as well. Now, I would argue that traditional philanthropy actually doesn't have much of an impact. Traditional philanthropy, giving away some of your profits, doesn't generate new profits. Giving away some of your profits might make you feel good. It might make some people think you're a nice company, but it doesn't actually do your business any good at all. In fact, what you're doing is giving away profits, giving away your shareholders' money, in actual fact. And I would also argue that traditional philanthropy doesn't have a huge social impact either, which is why a lot of philanthropists, as many of you know, have really gone into the area of social business and social enterprise, establishing new social businesses with a very clear social environmental purpose, which actually often do have a much bigger social impact because they survive in the marketplace and they're not dependent on grants, they're not dependent on philanthropy and constantly being given money by rich companies or rich people, for example. The other thing that we've seen, of course, is a lot of philanthropic activities in companies moving along the bottom axis towards what I've called business first, social value added. And this is typically where companies start developing corporate social responsibility programs, CSR programs, but you know that the real purpose of the business, number one, is profitability. And we're adding on a bit of social responsibility and we're adding on a bit of sustainability, but it doesn't really become strategic. It becomes strategic when we move to that top right-hand corner and recognize actually that if we create business models that do create business impact and at the same time really do create societal impact, then we are going to be able to create real change. So that top right-hand model is where really successful sustainability strategies exist, which are essentially based on shared value principles. And one of the most important aspects of that goes back to the innovation that SMEs are so good at. And I just want to dwell on this issue of innovation for a little while. For me, there are five very important ingredients for successful innovation. They start with purpose at the top left-hand side. So a company needs to have a purpose. If your purpose is to maximize profits and maximize return to your shareholders and make rich people richer, that's fine by me. Just tell me that's your purpose, and then I'll decide whether I actually want to do business with you. But the reality is, of course, that many companies want to do more than that. And things like sustainability, the environment, social responsibility become part of their competitive positioning. So we need to be able to sort of articulate that. The second thing I want companies to do is address specific needs using the skills and assets that they have. So don't try and address every single social need in the world because you'll fail. Why not try and concentrate on those needs where you have knowledge, where you have expertise, and where you have corporate and other human assets, for example. Then we need to measure. We constantly need to measure the link between social and business outcomes. So I'll say this again at the end. For me, the best measure of a successful sustainability strategy for a business will be increased profitability. But at the same time, we also need to be able to measure the social and environmental impacts that we're creating, which benefit society, people, the environment, biodiversity, etc. In many cases, we'll have to do this whilst working with others as well. So a lot of really good sustainability shared value strategies will involve others. It might involve NGOs, it might involve universities, it might involve other businesses, it might even involve our competitors in some unique cases. But we need to co-create strategies, and we need to be able to work with others on creating innovative change. And the last thing we need is we need a structure that creates innovation. And one of the things I see when I look around Asia, what I see in many, many businesses is not structures that create innovation, but structures that actually damage innovation. And one of the things that most damages innovation is a culture where you are not allowed to make mistakes. Because if you don't make mistakes, and if you're not prepared to make mistakes, then you won't be creative, you won't experiment, and you won't be innovative. So one of the things I say to companies, if you make a mistake, that's just fine as long as you learn from it. If you make the same mistake twice, then you're really stupid. But making a mistake is not a problem, and we need to allow these innovative structures to thrive through having a culture of experimentation, creativity, and allowing the occasional mistake around the place. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I think is really clever, crazy innovation. 10 years ago now, Patagonia rolled out a whole bunch of adverts like this one. So here is a Patagonia jacket. I guess that many of you have heard of this brand, and it's an expensive brand. It's not a mass brand. It's an expensive brand, but they rolled out pictures of their clothes, and on top of it, they put, "Don't buy this jacket." Now, you might think that's a bit crazy, but actually it's rather clever, because the real message here is that don't buy this jacket unless you realize it's sustainable, it's recyclable, it uses cotton that has no pesticides, it comes from sustainable sources of cotton. By the way, if the zip in the jacket breaks in the first 5 years, just bring it back to the shop and we'll replace it for you. And at the end of life, this jacket can be recycled as well, but actually that end of life could easily be 20 years. Because this jacket, it's of such high quality, it will last 20 years, as opposed to something you pick up in a fast retailing store that often is used for maybe 3 or 4 months. So if you take the cost of each time you wear this jacket, it could be significantly cheaper than something that you pick up for 10 or 20 US dollars, for example, which would be a fraction of the price that this jacket costs. Since Patagonia launched this new advertising campaign, their sales increased 60% between 2012 and 2016 because they tapped into that niche product market of people willing to pay a higher price for a product that could prove it was sustainable, and because Patagonia could measure and demonstrate that sustainability for them. Here's another great piece of innovation linked to climate change. This is a company called Cocotec, based in the Philippines. What Cocotec does, very briefly, is it buys coconut shells from coconut farmers. Those coconut shells would traditionally have been waste and just get thrown away. But actually what they do is they buy the coconut shells, the coconut husks from the farmers, which gives the farmers another income. It then takes those husks, grinds them down, creates a yarn or a thread from those husks, which are then woven into this matting that you see in the picture by rural women, who then are also getting an additional income by creating these coconut mats. These coconut mats are then used in areas where there's soil erosion because of landslides, or in areas where there's potential soil erosion and that are vulnerable to things like typhoons and heavy rainfalls that we're going to get more and more of associated with climate change. And what happens is you put this matting in place, and that's what's going on in the picture. You then plant in the holes of the matting grasses, bushes, and trees that have long root systems. Those long root systems, as they grow, then hold the land and hold the hillside in place. And then the coconut matting over time, well, it biodegrades, because when all said and done, it's just coconut. So it actually biodegrades. Now, the alternative to this is to use plastic. Use plastic matting with holes in the middle, same principle, but it doesn't biodegrade. It sort of stays there as a sort of bright orange eyesore forever. Cocotech is a hugely profitable company, started by a man who had this innovative idea for disaster prevention and disaster preparedness. And his business now is growing into coastal areas of Vietnam as well, where there's all sorts of problems over erosion as well. Supply chains is something I talked about earlier. There are lots of opportunities in the supply chains. CJ Group is a Korean company that makes chili sauce. Korea is one of the biggest consumers of chilies in the world because they love kimchi every day pretty much, and therefore the consumption of kimchi, chili sauces, chili products generally that goes into those types of products is enormous. CJ Corporation sources its chilies from Vietnam, and it used its expertise and skills to work with those farmers to make higher quality chilies. It also helped them establish and refurbish irrigation systems so that the chilies were getting the right amount of water at the right time. They ended up increasing their productivity massively because of those irrigation systems. And the combination of a high quality chili crop and a crop that was much bigger increased the farmers' incomes 5-fold. Now just think about that. Farmers who were earning $100 a month then started earning $500 a month. Imagine the impact that has on yourself and your family and your children when your income goes up 5-fold. It was also great for CJ Group. They got more chilies, they got better quality chilies, and they got a more sustainable source of chilies that was less prone to things like disease and crop failure. So they make money out of this as well. So it's a great example of an innovative sustainability strategy, which is benefiting poor farmers, but also creating a sustainable product source. Now, the wonderful thing about all of this that I'm talking about is this type of shared value approach generates a virtuous business cycle. If I can create a positive social impact in a way that also creates a positive business impact, profitability, then I'm going to continue to innovate to create more positive social impacts. So, if I can make profitability by meeting the needs of society and the environment, then I'm just going to keep doing it and I'm going to scale it up. Which chief executive in the world does not want to make more profits? And if I can make more profits by having more and more of a positive impact on society through the sorts of sustainability strategies that I'm going to talk about, that I've been talking about today, then it doesn't require much thought to realize that that is going to create an awful lot of positive impacts for society and for the environment. What this requires us to do is to sort of recognize that we need to be on a journey in all businesses, big or small, towards thinking about how we innovatively provide products and services that are profitable, but also create also address a real social or environmental need. So we need to move away from this idea of giving, this idea of a sort of reactive philanthropy. It's nice to give away some of my profits. We need to move away from that, and we need to go on a journey where we start developing perhaps a few standalone initiatives, but then sustainability becomes completely aligned to our business. And we think about sustainability, we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, and eventually sustainability becomes completely embedded in our proactive strategy, which becomes a source of competitive advantage. Now, we know this is possible. We've got the evidence. This is a journey. Some companies are rapidly moving towards the right-hand side of this particular journey, where they are creating more and more value for business and simultaneously having a much more positive impact on business and the environment. So let me finish off in the last few minutes that I've got allocated to me by making a few recommendations, particularly recommendations for smaller and medium-sized companies. There are massive opportunities out there. Entrepreneurs, people who run small businesses, are often great at identifying those opportunities. And as I said before, that's why we see actually the bulk of innovation in the world actually happening in smaller companies, not these big juggernauts where it's very difficult to actually manage. So think about the new opportunities that are out there. Think about a range of opportunities. Some of these are business to business, particularly linked to supply chain efficiencies and new products that we might source from supply chains. But a lot of them will also be business to consumer initiatives as well, particularly targeting consumers who may be willing to pay price premiums, but not forgetting poor consumers as well, because we can still make money serving the needs of poor consumers if we can do it at scale. And that was the business success that Vision Spring has. You know, the actual margin on one pair of glasses is only $4 US, but the potential market is 700 million people. Within the organization, I think we need to try and build an entrepreneurial culture. In some small organizations, it's there. In startups, it's often there already. But don't lose it. Don't become so embroiled in management systems and standards. Don't become so embroiled in your spreadsheets that you actually forgot what really gets you up and excited in the morning. So we need to sort of try and build and maintain this entrepreneurial culture that looks at these new opportunities and looks at them in a way that actually creates value for business and society. Make sure we create capacity and structures for innovation. Let's not stifle innovation. Let's allow people to be creative. Let's allow people to come up with new crazy ideas. I often say there's no such thing as a bad idea. Actually, there probably are actually, but it's a nice way of thinking about things. Think about those structures for innovation. Engage with your stakeholders, because as you engage with your stakeholders, you'll see the trends. Sustainability I sometimes describe as a bit like the fashion industry. Things come and they go. If you can stay on top of the trends, you can stay on top of the opportunities, then there will be profitable business opportunities coming your way. And then constantly measure success. Measure success in terms of measuring your profitability, because in the medium term, that's the best indicator of sustainability. So measure your profitability, but also measure the impact you're having on society and the environment as well. And remember, as I've said a few times before, really, the best metric for sustainability is actually profitability. And what I want to see is a whole new generation of new SMEs who are contributing to society and the environment and making a good, healthy profit for themselves. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much. And I think we're pretty much on time. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Welford, for this very thought-provoking kind of sharing. I especially like the argument on the philanthropy being the traditional kind of philanthropy and versus the new way of thinking and not thinking about giving back and how we can actually use the money for more societal impact. Thank you so much for letting us see this sustainability via a fresh new angle and perspective. Okay, so now we would like to invite Dr. Ang Sa-Keng, Institute Director of UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute, to start our fireside chat session with Dr. Welford, as well as Benjamin, founder and CEO at Speckle Singapore and Speckle International. Speckle is an award-winning cleaning services social enterprise, which has successfully transited into a clean tech company. So besides bringing innovation to the environmental services industry, Speckle also provides job opportunity to marginalized individuals in the society. I will let Ben share, of course, he's the best person to share more with us as to what Speckle is really doing for the society and the environment. I will now hand over to Dr. Ang to open the session. Dr. Ang, please, thank you.
Hi, thanks, Richard. It's really insightful presentation. Learned a lot about what sustainability is. Sustainability is not about doing good, not doing philanthropy. It's a lot of meaning to sustainability. And later on, we'll actually go through a number of questions I'm going to feature. Now, since you've done all the heavy lifting, Richard, I'll let you have a bit of a break. I'm going to start off with Benjamin. Benjamin, thank you very much for spending time with us. I understand your company, Speckle, has successfully implemented sustainability program. Now, would you like to share some of the key objectives of Speckle's sustainability effort?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here, Doctor. Thanks a lot to Dr. Richard as well for the sharing. I was writing down notes on the side as well, making sure that we progress together, not only here, but for the long run as well. So really thank you for the insightful sharing. To the rest of the people in the audience, the participants, really thank you for being here on a Friday afternoon. We are in between the PM break to getting off work at 6 p.m. So thank you for being here. Maybe I just want to share a bit of the background, a bit of the journey of Speckle, so that you have a bit of the understanding behind the context on why we actually started this in the first place and where we are at this moment. So I did not come from this industry. I did not come from the cleaning industry. Neither were my parents in this cleaning industry. I was from the public sector. I served about 5 years in the civil service as a policy writer. And then after that, I joined a venture capital firm as well. My background is in economics. I did my postgrad here in Singapore. I did my bachelor's in US. So how did I end up here? How did I end up in this industry? Pretty much my life changed through a phone call. It was just any random day like today. I received a call from a friend, and my friend said that, there are some workers that have been retrenched from the market. Could we do something to help? So of course, at that point of time, it wasn't an immediate, oh, let's start a business. It wasn't that way. It was more like, okay, can we help them look for jobs? And this was back 5 years ago in 2017, where Airbnb was growing quite fast in Southeast Asia. So we said that, okay, why not we match them with jobs in the housekeeping sector? So that was how we got started. And true enough, there was demand. Within 6 months, from just 3 properties that we were providing housekeeping service to, we were doing more than 50 units of Airbnb. So from there, we started asking ourselves, we hired, we trained marginalized groups, we trained the people who have been retrenched. What else could we do? What else could we do as an organization? So that's where we took a stand. That's where we took a stand and say that let's improve and let's increase our social impact. Let's not just talk about recruiting people who got retrenched, but the ex-offenders, people with disabilities, people from marginalized communities, the single parents, people with mental health backgrounds. And that's how we slowly grew. But of course, as what Doctor has mentioned, this did not start off from the start that we wanted to go out in a big bang. We did not expect to be a B Corp overnight as well. So I would say that we really would say that this is all part of the journey. It has to be progressive, but the culture and the DNA on why we actually started the company is really important. And that's why I wanted to bring it back to the context. What were the key objectives in our sustainability efforts? It was pretty much just to provide good jobs to marginalized Singaporeans. One sentence, we wanted them to have good jobs, we wanted them to progress in life, we wanted them to have better life ahead. I think that was the key starting point. And then now, there's so many other things that we are currently doing. But I would say that having that spark from day one was really important on where we wanted the business to go.
Thanks, Benjamin. Again, very insightful. I guess at the end, we need to look for purpose, and the purpose that Richard mentioned is so important. That diagram that Richard showed, right, with the on innovation, the purpose is actually so important, and I think that's what you started with. I think. Thank you. Right, Richard. Let's go on get to you. Your side of things. I understand you mentioned that profitability at the end is actually the best gauge for success of a sustainability program. Now, sometimes in between, before you get to that profitability, right, are there some interim preliminary measures that SMEs can actually look at to kind of make sure that they actually track their progress over time? Because I think, you don't get to sustainability outcomes, right, immediately. And earlier, what I heard is short-term pain for long-term benefit. Okay, so is there some interim stuff that we can actually look at, some measures that we can actually look at on our way to gaining profitability?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, profitability is a good measure of success, but in the medium term, and there's a journey to get there, of course. I mean, at the very simplest level, we can simply count outputs. So if I go back to my example of C products, we can simply count the number of products that were enhanced with nutrition that they managed to sell to poor families. In a similar way, Benjamin can count the number of people he employs from minority marginalized groups, for example. But actually, that's quite easy. But the tough bit, which we really ought to try, is then answer the question, so what? So, if I am providing jobs to people who may not otherwise have got jobs, and I'm paying them good salaries and not exploiting them, so what? What does that mean for themselves? What does that mean for their families? So if you take the example, again, we can talk about Benjamin's business, or we can take the example of the chili farmers. When I'm taking a marginalized group that may be poor and then giving them good work that actually significantly increases their salary, then I ought to have a measure of the so what. And a measure of the so what then goes back to what is possible with their lives. Are they more healthy? Can they get access to better nutrition? Are their children then benefiting because they're more likely to go to school, or they also getting better nutrition and those sorts of things? It also applies to the environment as well. I mean, we can measure environmental. We can have environmental measures like reduction in electricity, which is great. Soft saves money. But the real so what is it also then produces a significant reduction in greenhouse gases, which helps us to mitigate the rapid onset of things like climate change. Now, those measures, I have to say, are more difficult to actually measure, and they won't necessarily be quantitative. So we can count outputs, but what I'm talking about now is more outcomes. So as a result of your innovation, as a result of what you're trying to do, what are the benefits there? Now, we have ways of measuring those, but they're much more tricky, and we sometimes have to make various assumptions, but we can do it. But sometimes they will be qualitative, particularly when we're talking about things like quality of life, of course.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing also is, I guess the so what can be sort of in some sense translated to the impact of your program on your stakeholders. I think that's sort of what I'm hearing. Thank you, Richard. All right.
May I add on to this
Benjamin.
point as
Yeah,
well?
please go ahead.
Because I fully agree with what Doctor has mentioned, to the point of so what? Because I think this was something that crossed our mind 3 years ago. We were running the business for 2 years. Our manpower was increasing. We were including a lot more different social causes into our business model. So we are hiring from different groups, and we asked ourselves this precise question: so what? So what if I hired 100 marginalized groups, 100 marginalized workers? Am I going to go for 200 next, 300 or 1,000? Will they be happy cleaning the same toilets for the next 20 years of their lives? Are they happy in this salary range? So these were the questions that we were asking ourselves. Where do we go from here as a social enterprise? And I think that was precisely that turning point, that pivot, to say that, rather than for us to keep reaching out into the same pool of the workforce, the marginalized workforce, let's focus a bit more about how we improve their standards of life, how we improve their quality of life. And that's where we decided on saying that let's put aside our money, let's focus on R&D, let's focus on technology, let's focus on really setting our sights far apart from the rest of the competition, from the market. Then that's how we decided on taking that direction, and that's how we start our pivot transformation towards innovation, started our pivot towards Speckle, to what we are today. So I really did appreciate that point that was brought up by Doctor. We had this exact light bulb moment about 2 years into our business.
Thank you. Well, it's very insightful. I think very often we look at sort of what's out there, and even though I understand from Richard there is actually no such thing called a benchmark, but in some cases, particularly in the frontier countries, paying people the market rate may not be a good thing, because in some of these places, right, paying people market rate is actually below the mark. In some sense, being inclusive business, you need to pay people above market, right? And you need to innovate to get the profitability. I think that's something that will kind of relate us to what, right? Richard, I understand that you mentioned there are a lot of things that are qualitative versus quantitative. Now, it's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because at the end, in order for us to measure, and one of your 5 things that you mentioned is actually one of them is measurement, right? Now, does it mean that if you can't measure it, then it's then difficult to kind of assess whether you are successful? How much of these qualitative do you have versus quantitative? Does it necessarily have to be quantitative?
I don't think it can always be quantitative. It's actually impossible, I think, to always come up with precise numbers. If we're talking about counting bottles of fish oil sold, that's a number. That's easy. But when you consider that a child who gets sufficient calcium in their diet when they're 5 years old are less likely to get osteoporosis or brittle bone disease when they're 65 years old. Measuring that is very difficult. So we know a health intervention at the age 5 can benefit you when you're 65. Now, I can tell that story, but that's really as much as I can do. I have to just tell that story and say, we do have research evidence that shows that ensuring that people have sufficient calcium while their bones are growing will turn out to be less likely that you get osteoporosis, but not completely unlikely. It's still possible, because there'll be other interventions as well. And so one of the problems we have is the further we go out from the intervention, and I'm talking about a 60-year period now, the more we just have to make assumptions. But if we can make those assumptions and tell those stories, at least based on research evidence, like we know that there's a link between osteoporosis and your bones growing as a child, then I think we can still measure success. But I can't put a precise number on it, but I can tell you a qualitative story that means that that business intervention was hugely worthwhile, of course.
Thank you, Richard. Benjamin, from your experience, have you kind of do you have examples of qualitative measures that you use?
I think measurements of the quantitative measurements, number one is that we measure how their standards of living has improved over a period of time. I think that's a very clear way of measuring a worker's wages. So I think when we talk about transforming or redesigning jobs or moving them up the career ladder, I think these are all parts of being a progressive company. So we are not just talking about increments of 5 or 10% beating inflation year on year, or paying them 10 to 15% above market rate. I don't think we are looking at just that, but I think we're talking about how do we actually provide extra value as a company, so that these jobs, when we create them, when we create new jobs for our workers, and we bring them along in our journey as a company of moving up the value chain, I think this is a very clear indication on how we can measure it. So for example, the the main thing I'd like to share here is when we transition from a cleaning to a cleaning technology company, how much value we increase over this period of time. As we understand, there are about 1,500 cleaning companies here in Singapore. We are all fighting over the same pool. We have about 70,000 cleaners in Singapore itself. It's a very we take the price. We are price takers because the market is perfectly competitive in this nature. So if we were to fight in this Red Sea, there's a very high chance that everybody is bidding over the same projects, and there are certain prices that we can set only. But when we created new technologies where we're able to price ourselves in a blue ocean, we take the blue ocean strategy. The jobs that we then create are very different in nature. We are able to price the jobs in something that has never been seen before. One thing that maybe I can highlight here is that, especially in relation to the current pandemic, our sector, the environmental sector, has been brought out to the front because we had to clean, we had to disinfect, we had to use different products. For us, it gave us a bit of a tailwind for us to get some to be highlighted during this current pandemic. But it also shows that if we did not take this approach to transition our company towards this direction, I think that maybe we would not have survived until today. I think this is something that we have to articulate. We have to, when we look back, it gets so scary because if we did not focus on sustainability from day one, if we did not focus on innovation from day one, 5 years down the road, we may not have existed. Until now, we may not be able to be. I may not be able to talk to you right now because we would have already been gone. We have been wiped out by the pandemic. We would have been, cease to exist. I think this is why measuring sustainability, implementing it from day one, building it into the culture, building into DNA, making it a pillar of the entire business is so important.
It's very interesting. Such a simple business in some sense, right? Very competitive industry, and yet there's still money to be made and differentiation to be had, right? In even such a very simple business, and while at the same time creating a lot of value for a lot of people that you care about. Thank you for sharing that, Benjamin. Right now, I understand from speaking to you earlier that the whole sustainability effort, right, took a while, right? I think Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
As you were kind of going through this journey, can you share with our SMEs some of the pain points, right? That could actually then help them to kind of avert or avoid the same problem that you had. What were the nasty surprises, perhaps? and then I will open it up to the members of the audience for Q&A. Thank you.
There are tons of nasty surprises when you run a business. Every day something will happen. Every day there will be another fire that you have to put out. So maybe just to share, I mean, I'm very open about this. Running a business is already very tough, right? We all know that 95% of businesses fail within the X number of years. I would say that running a social enterprise with a social mission is even tougher, because not only are you facing the external factors, you're also dealing with behaviors, you're also dealing with emotions, you're also dealing with psychological mindsets, you're also dealing with social circumstances. So managing ex-offender with drug background, with drug taking background, it's very different from managing a person with mental health issues. I have seen cases where some of my workers, they tried to stash drugs at my workplaces. I have seen workers with mental health issues threatening to commit suicide at the job sites. I have seen people with mental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, being accused of molesting clients. So, there are so many reasons and so many surprises that could happen on a day-to-day basis. We take things in our stride. These are things that I've woken up at 5 a.m. in the morning with anxiety, with cold sweat. Entrepreneurs, we all go through this journey. But there are also the good parts to it. There are also stories that we can share at the end of the day that I had a worker. She has been staying in a rental housing for more than 10 years with her husband, considered low income, considered under financial and social assistance by the government. One day she gave me a letter. I thought that it was a resignation letter. I was so prepared. She was a good worker, but so I was like, oh no, what is this letter about? It was a letter from our government, our Singapore government, the Housing Development Board. She told me that, thanks to you, thanks to the company, after working with you, my salary has increased. I have good wages. I have, I'm finally able to afford buying a flat here in Singapore. So, such stories, and it came in during Christmas period. Imagine how we feel as an employer, right? So I think there are such stories that pushes us as an organization to say, yeah, I think it's worth it. I think it's good to keep our head down and do what we are doing. One of the areas that Dr. Welford has highlighted among his 7 key areas is building the trust and reputation of your organization. So whatever we do has to be consistent. It has to be believable to what we want to do in the future as well. I think this is very important because I strongly believe every human have a sensor. They sense when people are not sincere. They sense it. So us as a company, when we go out there and say, yeah, we want to do good, we want to roll out certain things, the first thing that everybody will ask is that, are you sure? Are you really doing it? Are you not just greenwashing things or good washing things? Are you sure? So we have to be very consistent, tucking our head in, putting our head down, not calling ourselves a social enterprise for many years, so that we don't go too early into that round, and we just continue doing what we want to do, what we set forth on doing. And sooner or later, when we build that reputation for doing good, when we build that reputation of being a sustainable company, more people will come and say, yeah, I think this is a company to be trusted. That's where the talents come in. That's where the new students, the fresh grads, they say, yeah, I want to work for a company with purpose. That's where I get my new talents from. That's where the business comes in, where they say that, yeah, I want to do business with a good company. I want to give your business to grow even further. So these are all medium to long-term profitability or tangible benefits that we do see. But it takes time. It really takes a long time for us to see that end of the light, to see that tunnel, end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Benjamin. Richard, over to you. In your years of advising companies in sustainability programs, right? And again, building on what Benjamin said, what were your experiences in terms of things that work and things that don't work? Can you help share some of these insights?
I think when it comes to sustainability, what works is to ensure that sustainability is embedded into the business strategy and not just added on. If your very business is about thinking about sustainability as well as all the other functions that's important, you're more likely to succeed. And I think one of the things I'm constantly saying to businesses that I talk to is you need to move your sustainability strategy into the center of the organization, because for so many businesses, it's at the edge of the organization. There's a little sustainability or CSR department, which is a little bit marginal. They have to write the sustainability report that no one then reads. They get involved in a couple of community-based initiatives that look more like philanthropy than business. They do a little bit of employee volunteering, which ends up being a little bit meaningless, to be honest, apart from building some teams. All of that needs to become center stage. The only way that that becomes center stage is if the people at the top of the organization allow it to be center stage and really understand the business case for sustainability. So your chief executive has to be on board, your senior management has to be on board, and if they're not, this will not work. Sustainability does need to be top down, although it can be bottom up as well, because that's where the innovation actually occurs, when we have people empowered to think creatively and innovatively. But if your sustainability strategy is not embedded into your overall business strategy, then ultimately it won't actually work. And I think increasingly now we've got a new generation of senior management who are beginning to recognize this. 30 years ago, it was a real struggle to convince people that even the environment should be taken seriously, to be absolutely honest with you. But these days, I think we've got a new generation of managers who've been talking about sustainability, who recognize the need to respond to stakeholders' demands around environmental and social issues. So I'm positive about what I see, but I still think for most businesses, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Now, I would like to now open the floor for questions to our wonderful panelists. Anyone, you can either type your question in the chat box, as Jennifer has been asking you to do, or you can raise your hand and I'll invite you to speak.
Hi, Dr. Ang. We have one question in our chat box.
Okay.
It's from Dr. Amin Bauer on the question on, are you sure would an accreditation help if it is going beyond self-calling? And if the answer is yes, what can be done to engage the government and business associations in an inclusive business strategy? So these questions are actually directed to Dr. Richard as well as Benjamin.
Yes.
I can't actually, is that question in the chat box?
It's in the Q&A. You can actually hit the Q&A button right at the bottom.
In the chat?
Okay, anyway, it's in the chat now.
Okay. Sorry, on the question of are you sure accreditation would help? Yeah, I'm not sure I really said too much about accreditation. If we're talking about accreditation in terms of certification, I think sometimes that can help you with your differentiation strategies. So I think sometimes some sort of accreditation helps. I'm not a great fan of accreditations like B Corp, I have to say. I'm not sure that they're really that necessary. I think product certifications, I think certain product category certifications can be really helpful. We can engage business associations. Fine, I think there's a role for industry bodies to come together and deal with what the industry is dealing with, and we've seen that with things like certifications around sustainable palm oil. So if we're seeing if we're talking about accreditations like that, fine. When it comes to government, I'll be completely frank with you. It's probably not really worth talking to government in most Asian countries at the moment because they don't get it. And you know, I'd rather sort of talk to business about business than government about business, to be completely frank. I mean, there are some people who sort of get this, but I've not really seen positive signs coming from government to encourage businesses to be sustainable. I'm much more positive about businesses encouraging businesses to be sustainable, to be honest. So yeah, I'm sometimes it might help, but a lot of time I don't think it's relevant.
Thank you. Benjamin, I think to Dr. Bao's question, right? I understand that your business has some accreditation, right? Would you like to share some of that with us?
I think that the basis of accreditation should always come from the intentions first. I think the purpose and intentions, we have to take a step back into asking ourselves, why are we going for the accreditation? There are 101 accreditations out there. You can easily buy an accreditation, you can easily buy an award, you can easily do a lot of things to get something that to market, right? So we had to take a step back to say that, am I doing this for what purpose? So I think that's the basic question. I agree with Doctor that certain things we need certification. Certifying that the product is green, certifying the product is non-toxic. These are all product-based. But one thing I find that it's very important for going through the B Corp journey, this whole accreditation process is the audit process. Why do I say so? Because anyone and everyone can make any claim that they want. I can go out there and say, yeah, look at me. I'm a really good company. Believe me, buy things from me. And there is no way from telling whether I'm, full of it. So I think an accreditation process that has certain scoring would help people do due diligence on calling such practices out. There will be companies that will be greenwashing what they sell, what they do. There will be companies that will call themselves a social enterprise, but are actually not a social enterprise. We all have seen that. We all know that. We see that they are doing it for certain reasons. But that's where accreditation comes in to say that, yeah, on this scoring of how many points, where do we actually stand, how do we actually improve? So I would say that for us going through the entire B Corp journey, I think our intentions here was that when we first started out, even 2 or 3 years into it, we have no idea what a B Corp is. We never heard of it. We have never seen it around, and we didn't know who else was a B Corp. That's a very honest conversation that I'm having here right now. We have no idea what is it. Even until today, when we go out telling our clients we are a B Corp here in Singapore, they say, what is it? You tell the government we are B Corp. They say, no, I don't care. Show me your track record. Show me which client you're working for. I make my assessment on giving you the project from that. So the B Corp accreditation or whatever accreditation doesn't really give us profitability advantages. So we have to go back to the main question on, so are we using this B Corp solely for marketing, or is it for us to measure where can we be in the next 3 years? I think from that, you will get the answer on whether you should or you should not go for any accreditation from there.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think it's very much the same as in education. How many accreditations do you need, right? And what is the value of the accreditation? Is it benchmarking to make yourself better, so that you know where you are, right, relative to everyone else? Or is it a mark of standards or quality? I think that's what we as an educational institution does. Now, in many cases, having accreditation doesn't it's not a motivator. It is very much a hygiene factor. You just have to have it because your competitors have it. So it doesn't really kind of give you an edge, right? But it does make your competitor shut them up in terms of like you having the same standards. The other thing is ranking. The same thing as we go on, right? You know, does ranking really move your numbers? I'm not sure. Okay. So, Dr. Bao, I hope that explains that answers your question. Is there anyone else? It's a wonderful opportunity for you guys to ask them any questions. Okay, we just give it 1 second, and then we will then go into another question from me to sort of wrap up this session. Um, I guess to a lot of SMEs out there, making that first move into sustainability is, I guess you either have a choice or you don't have a choice. In some cases, you get pushed into it and you sort of discover this wonderful thing called sustainability. Now, at the same time, you also have a business that you're running, right? You have an existing business that's running, and trying to kind of venture into something that's so new, right? It's kind of scary. Okay. Now, in your experience, right, what are some of the low-lying fruit that can help our SMEs, right, get into it without the necessary additional risk to the existing business?
Maybe
You
I'll
know,
just. Sorry, Prof. Yeah, you first.
I was going to say, Benjamin's better positioned to answer that from a personal perspective, but I actually don't believe that this is about additional risk. I actually think it's about reducing risk in many cases. And I think, what SMEs, I mean, again, I go back to the point I made at the beginning that you should not see SMEs as little big companies. They're fundamentally different. And I think the people who run SMEs, and I've done that myself, I've started 4 businesses over the course of my life. People who run and start SMEs are motivated by very different factors than people who are running very large businesses. And I was actually just reflecting on that issue, Benjamin, because I'm sure in many ways you could have made more money and had probably had an easier life staying in the public sector or working for a big enterprise rather than running a smaller enterprise where you wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, right? So I mean, I think for people like you, it's interesting to hear about what your personal motivation is, as well as why, as well as answering that question about the nature of SMEs, I think.
This is a question that I ask myself every day as well. It's like, why are we doing what we are doing? What drives me on a day-to-day basis? Why am I still doing what I'm doing after 5 years? I think this is a relevant question, and I would say that as an entrepreneur or as a startup, that we have been doing this for a number of years. There are days I have a love-hate relationship with my company because it's my baby, right? It's pretty much akin to, on some days you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm so proud of it. I'm proud of it being what it has become. I'm proud of it, having taken a steps forward into maturing as an organization, into profitability and becoming one of the leading social enterprises here in Singapore, as well as we have gone overseas as well. So there are days like that. And then there are days where I feel that, my goodness, why is this my baby? How long more must I hold this baby for and handhold it? So I would say that there are ups and downs. It's an emotional roller coaster. But I would say that from now until the end of my time with this organization, there will be a day where that happens, where I'm no longer the CEO. That could be either, for whatsoever reason, personal health, or maybe my investors don't like me anymore, kicks me out. So many reasons. I still have some things to do here. I believe that I have told my investors the same things as well, that if you feel that I can still contribute value, provide value, positive value to the organization, keep me. If you feel that I do not contribute that level, may not just be financial gains, may not just be financial performance, but I'm driving the company in the direction that we no longer believe that it's supposed to be, that let me go. I may not be the best person to run it. So we have this relationship, my investors and myself, we have this relationship. I would say that my personal motivation now is that, can we make Speco to be an organization that is recognized globally and proud to be from Singapore. I think I still have a long way to learn. I have a long way to grow from there, especially in this pandemic where we are in a growth phase as well. I have a sizable runway. So from now till the end of that journey, I have no idea when they may be. Definitely, if I've stayed on with my previous career, I think that life would be less complicated. This is what I would just mention. I think life would be less complicated. But one thing I would like to share is that for the past 5 years, I believe that I've learned much more than the past 15 years of my life. I think the learning journey, the growth is uh, not just myself as a CEO leading the organization, crisis management, things that could go wrong could possibly go wrong, that Murphy's Law and everything that comes along with it. I believe that this entire 5 years could possibly be a stepping stone for something much bigger in the future. Whether or not this company grows, or, at the end of the day, I do not know what this company will become. There's always that possibility. While, right now we are doing quite okay. So I would like to add one thing to what Dr. Ang has mentioned as well, regarding what SMEs can do, reducing risk, lowering the risk, or how do they get started. I think culture is very important. Building that culture, getting the buy-in, starting small and building momentum. Getting to a B Corp accreditation may not be what everybody wants to do. I just share with you a conversation I had this morning with a close friend of mine. He left his father's company very recently. We are about the same age, mid-30s. He left his father's company. It's a very big construction company here in Singapore, public listed. So he's the second generation rich kid. He started another company, and he asked me, why should I be a B Corp? Out of the blue, just this text. Why should I be a B Corp? He said that, I've been asking myself how much of an advantage this translates to. I'm differentiating actually being responsible and getting certification. I'm incorporating responsible actions, but certification is another issue. I don't need a B Corp to do that. I can incorporate into my practice. So this question just came in this morning. So pretty much what I shared earlier. So what are your intentions of doing so? Your company is ISO certified as well. So do you really need a B Corp? Why are you actually going on this journey? Ask yourself and internalize it. And you have to articulate this to you, your management, and your investors. I think you need to find that question, that pain point as well.
Thank you, Benjamin and Richard. I'm looking at the clock. We have time for one last question. I think Dr. Bao have asked one question. I think there's another question from Louise. I think let's give Louise a chance. And I think the question is SME developing space technology that has a huge project value of 1 billion or so, right? But you have to work with local government. And in some sense, you can't trust the local government, and it's a futile effort, right? And question is, in your experience, how do we deal with a situation where you need the government, but you cannot work with the government? It's a catch-22 situation in some sense. Any one of you would like to take this question?
Well, I'll just reflect on that question in terms of what some of my clients say to me. And I can assure you the problem is not just local government, it's national government as well. And without mentioning any government names or countries, a lot of my clients basically say they stay as far away from government as possible, particularly when those governments are perceived to be corrupt, or at least partially corrupt in some places, the damage that can do to their own reputations is quite significant. So, we have seen over recent years some significant local government corruption, but also some quite scandalous national government corruption in some cases as well. And what my clients basically say is that they just try and stay away because the risks, ironically, of being too close to government when they are perceived as being corrupt or dishonest is really really much too high.
Thank you.
I think that this is a commercial decision. I think this is a commercial decision where the project it's definitely bigger than whatever that we have. You want to work with the government, you need the government, but some aspects of it shows certain level of friction. I echo Prof's views that sometimes it may not be the time, it may not be the space to work and with the government, and you try to distance yourself from the government as much as possible. I think we have to understand what commercial value this project actually brings to your company. Whether is it a do or die situation. A $1 billion project could definitely push you up your valuation by many times into a unicorn. But I think for this specific purpose, at what cost? Are you selling your soul for it? I mean, you can buy your soul for $1 billion. I think many people will be willing to sell their soul for that. But as to, is this $1 billion really there? That will be the first question I'll ask as an entrepreneur. Is it what they said it's supposed to be there? Maybe I just share from my personal experience. My technology was created pre-COVID. It was something that would be able to extend the shelf life of all these infectants out there. So when the coronavirus first hit the shores, there was tailwind for us because our product was tested effective against coronavirus. Automatically, we had leads coming in from all over the world. Within that 1 month from 2020, everybody wrote into us saying that they know the Datuk here, the ministers there, the sultans here and there. So obviously we were excited, right? As a new company, we say, oh, this could bring in millions and millions of dollars for the company. It's good, and wow, it's all these government projects. But when we realize that after doing a lot of due diligence, we realize that most of these people are not real. They are trying to get to the ministers of whatsoever country. They are lubricating the wheels through various politicians, but the linkages are not sincere at all. So this was something that we learned over the past year. People promise, people overpromise, and that's where when I shared that this journey, especially the last year, has taught me so much on exercising discretion and calling out bullshit. I think there's a lot of things that I learned over the past year, and I think this was one major aspect of it.
Yeah, and on the subject of bullshit, to borrow your word, I mean, space technology, which is mentioned by the question, is a very interesting area at the moment because billionaires like Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos can now project themselves into space for 11 minutes, I think it was, that they spent actually in space. But the impact on the environment of doing that is absolutely enormous. And in a world where we are now accelerating the chaos around climate change that we're seeing, we just have to look at the forest fires we're seeing in Australia, 50 degrees centigrade in Canada, the flooding we're seeing in northern China now. These are all accelerating trends towards climate change. Why we are launching rockets into space for billionaires and creating thousands and thousands of tons of greenhouse gases, I'm puzzled to see. And I think there will be a backlash against those businesses because they're very, very much businesses for millionaires. I don't see the social benefit of anything they're doing personally, and the environmental cost is absolutely terrible. So, I mean, what I've been talking today about is sustainable business, and I really do think we have to have a serious conversation about the sort of space technology that is transporting people up into space for 11 minutes.
The question is like, so what?
Yes.
I think it goes back to that so what thing, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm looking at the clock, and I think we have sort of run out of time. I'd like to thank both of you for the candid sharing, and particularly Dr. Welford for the insightful lecture that he has given us. Benjamin, for your experiences as sharing, and very generous sharing of your experiences in your business. Now it's been a wonderful learning journey for myself. Learned fair bit on the idea of simplicity is good. As an SME, don't try to be too fanciful. Focus. I think it's important. Innovation is important, and to drive innovation, thanks for sharing that whole part, the framework for getting innovation to work, particularly understanding what's the purpose and ending with ensuring that you have the right structure for it. Now, this right structure is something you're going to do in the next webinar. Okay, how do you make it work? I think it's a really nice link to the next thing that we're going to do on the 27th of August. Okay, and so how do you cultivate a sustainability mindset within your organization? Okay, which is good. Now, the other things that I've learned is shared values. This whole idea of the win-win situation, right? And it's not philanthropy. It's you really have to kind of feel for it, and there's a purpose in doing all this. Other thing that I learned today is about short-term pain versus long-term benefit. Okay, and in the long run, you need to kind of measure it, and one of the best measure of the success of your sustainability effort is profitability. Okay, you can run, but you cannot hide. Profitability is undoubtedly the litmus test. Okay. Another interesting thing that I learned is about starting from the top. Okay, the involvement of the board, involvement of the CEO, the founder is important. At the same time, for innovation to work, right, you need to also sometimes do it from the bottoms up to have the buy-in from the people on the ground. Okay, and that's how you can get innovation going. Okay. Now, the last thing I learned is really having sustainability embedded in the very DNA of the organization. Okay. Now, if anything, I hope this session allow all of us in business or otherwise, right, to reflect on what we've been doing and what we have been exposed to.